What happens to you when you die if your life has been one big fat lie from beginning to end? That's what we're going to find out in this podcast. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. You're listening to the Don't Make the Black Kids Angry podcast. Here we talk about black mob violence, black on white crime, black criminality, wildly out of proportion, and how it's black on white, black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on kitties, puppies, and turtles. And how reporters and public officials and lots of other people, like the dude we're about to meet here, how they are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. And how that denial, deceit, and delusion can sometimes cost you your own life. That's what happened to this Black Lives Matter activist down in New Orleans. He just was killed last night. Maybe the night before. He was killed last night. And we don't know who did it. But you know what? It wouldn't pass my standard, but it passed the standards of the editorial writers at the New Orleans Times-Picayune. They're going to hear from them in a minute, but they had a big column saying, yeah, well, you know, that happens in New Orleans all the time. So we know he was black. We know he was killed by a black person, but that doesn't mean anything. And here's why. I mean, this guy was a big time Black Lives Matter activist. He was a leader in North Charleston, South Carolina. You know, the weird thing about being a leader in Black Lives Matter is not like the Rotary Club. It's not like Jack in the Box. There aren't membership cards. There aren't franchises. If you got a little something to say and you could say it well enough, and maybe you even do something to get yourself arrested, for some reason, the TV cameras gravitate towards you, well, congratulations. If you're wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, you're the head of Black Lives Matter for a circle for 1,000 yards in all directions. But let's get back to the question, what happens to people if their entire life is a lie? We're going to talk about that in a minute, why his life is a lie. But I mean, the first thing I was looking for examples of that. What about the guys who in Tennessee, the guys who go out and handle snakes because they think the Bible instructs them to handle snakes? What happens to them? They die. When they get buried, they're kind of hailed as holy people. What happened to all the popes who told everybody the earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around the earth, including the sun? Galileo came along and said, hey, I think, not really sure of this, but, hey, I think the sun's the center and the earth is moving around it. Anybody else notice that? They arrested him for that. They made him recant. By the way, on his deathbed, his final words are, se mueve. It moves. That's what Galileo said. He wasn't going to live his life as a lie, even if he was forced on it. But now we look back on those popes, and all we remember them for is enforcing an enormous lie on a bunch of ignorant people. And now we come to this guy. His whole thing with Black Lives Matter is cops, white racist cops, are relentless practitioners of racism against black people. And black people are relentless victims of this racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always trying to arrest black people for no reason whatsoever. That was his life. And when people like me or people like Heather McDonald or other people just basically come out and said, listen, when you walk out of the door of your house, whether it's Poughkeepsie, New York, where you were born, or Charleston, where you lived, or New Orleans, where you were visiting, when you walked out the door, you're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times more likely to be killed by one of the fellas than by a cop for no damn reason whatsoever. That had no meaning. Because in his mind, he was being brutalized by the cops for whatever. He was living a lie. That lie cost him. On some deluded level, he thought he could walk around New Orleans with his bike, drive around New Orleans with his bike at 1:30 a.m. and party with the fellas, the other fellas. And all he would have to do is give him the old Black Power salute, give him the old secret handshake, and everybody would say, "Hey, what's up, my man? Hey, aren't you in Black Lives Matter? Didn't you become famous for doing something really stupid?" He would say, "Yeah, that was me." All right, let's meet this big hero. Let's meet this guy who today is being hailed in this with comparisons to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
New at 11 people came together to honor the life of local Black Lives Matter activist Muhyiddin Dabaha.
He was shot and killed this morning in New Orleans. He made national headlines. This time last year, you see it right there when he snatched the Confederate flag from another protester in downtown Charleston.
Our Alexis Simmons has been following this story and has more. She was at North Charleston for a vigil earlier tonight.
Alexis, what message did people have who were there? What did they say?
People are remembering Muhyiddin Dabaha, a Black Lives Matter community activist.
He was about empowering the community to fix things for themselves.
My heart hurts. Let's keep
definitely wasn't
that dream that he had alive.
He wants us to celebrate. He will want us to celebrate with a passion to overcome.
People gathered to honor his life outside of North Charleston City Hall, a place where he fought for justice. Kimberly Duncan is his older sister.
This was his passion. He did it from the heart. He was loving. He was funny. He was smart. But it bothered him. The injustice just bothered him.
Walter Scott's brother says Muhyiddin helped their family get justice.
I thank God for placing him here to be the soldier that he is and that he was.
Activist Pastor Dixon says he organized this vigil.
It was one of the most charismatic people I've ever met in my life. There was something about that there was some quality that he possessed that just drew people to him.
Moya is kind of free-spirited, so it's always fun and games, always a little bit of fun, a little bit of seriousness, a mix of everything, but overall, happiness.
I don't ever think he felt appreciated or felt that people believed in what he was doing 100%, so he would be very happy to know that his work was not for nothing.
And there were several people tonight who say they are committed to continuing his legacy in the fight for justice, education, and building up the community. Now, police in New Orleans have not identified a suspect, and his family says while he was there, he was continuing his mission.
Okay, so we heard from his family. He was a great guy, and he did all these great things. Everybody liked him. He was smart. He was funny. He was serious. And you can't see this here, but his big claim to fame was when, they were having a protest in Charleston. Now, I keep getting Charleston and Charlotte mixed up. They were having a protest in Charlotte. Sorry. And, the police were keeping the protesters separate. He took a running dive over a piece of yellow police tape, and he attacked this guy holding a Confederate flag and took the flag, and he became a hero for that. That's what his thing was. He became a hero. Okay, you're a hero. Let's hear the hero talk in his own words.
Right after the Manual 9, we did a march here. It was called Burying White Supremacy. And we marched from John C. Calhoun's statue, where we burned some Confederate flags, and we marched over here to Denmark Vesey's statue. This is the space where we find some inspiration of a slave rebellion organizer who fought to free Charlestonians and to remind them of their freedom. The idea of Denmark Vesey was one of the reasons why Dylan Roof targeted Mother Emanuel. That was Denmark Vesey's church also. And so the idea of Denmark Vesey is one of political and social independence for Africans. We have to remember that we haven't experienced nationhood because we were imported into a different nation. And so having a national identity, is still something we're hunting for. Unfortunately, we can't just say that we're American if we don't get to experience, the freedom and the liberties and the equity of that. And so the strategic move to keep our history, especially our history of resistance, rebellion, and fight for liberation, to keep that history silent and out of our waking consciousness is deliberate and strategic, So this is the place we come for inspiration.
Look, I'm not down with the Confederate flag. I'm not down with anybody who waves it around in public or puts it on your car door, your bumper sticker in front of your house. I'm not down with that because I'm not a jerk. That's why. But, if that's your thing, go ahead. I don't care. But I guess it doesn't trouble any person on this planet. It's not supposed to trouble any person on this planet that somebody can get a flag and wave it around for reasons of their own. And have somebody come along and attack them, take the flag, and everybody now regards him as the next coming of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And, okay, you know what? Whatever. That's okay with you. It's okay with me. Didn't take the New Orleans papers very long to figure out, what their problem, what their take was on the death of this hero. I mean, geez, the way they talk about him, it almost makes it sound like, they're going to put him in one of those, wooden boats. I think I saw this on the Vikings a few weeks ago. When the king died, they put him on a wooden boat. They put flowers there. Sometimes they'll kill somebody, put them on the boat with them. Put all this wood and all this oil on there and all these candles, and they throw, put the thing on fire. I mean, I felt like that's what they wanted to do to this guy, just because they were having trouble figuring out the exact right way to honor him. But the paper in New Orleans wants us to remember that we shouldn't use the murder of a Black Lives Matter activist to discredit his cause. Translation: we shouldn't use the murder of a dude whose whole entire life was a lie. When he died because of that lie, well, we shouldn't really confront anybody with that lie because, there's nothing we could learn from that, right? But the paper wrote an editorial. There's actually had a couple things in there that I did not know. I know. We could write major encyclopedias full of stuff good old Colin does not know. But why don't I run through a couple of paragraphs from this editorial? I think you might find it as interesting as I did. On September 20th, 1958, as he signed a copy of his book, quote, Stride Toward Freedom, the Montgomery Story, in a Harlem department store, author Martin Luther King Jr. was approached by Izola Ware Curry, a black woman. She plunged a metal letter opener into the chest of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The tip of the blade got so close to King's aorta that doctors told him that if he had sneezed, he probably would have died. 6 years after King's assassination, his mother, Alberta King, was murdered inside the Ebenezer Baptist Church by a black man who had developed a hit list of black Christians to kill. That King and his mother were both attacked by black people doesn't mean King was wrong to have made the dismantling of America's racist systems his priority. King knew how high crime was in black communities, and still he fought segregation. In fact, in a December 1967 sermon when he expressed disappointment at crime in black communities, he made sure to explain, so the reporter present wouldn't misunderstand, that he attributed these higher rates of crime to the racist environment in which they occurred. This is what he said. Now I realize, and I want to say this quickly because I see a reporter here and I don't want to be misquoted. I want to say quickly that I realize these standards in which we lag behind, whether they are cultural, whether they are moral, criminal, or whatnot, they are like they are because of segregation. They are like they are because of segregation. They are here because of the torturous logic to argue. They are here because of segregation. Segregation is the causal factor. And it is a sort of torturous logic to argue for the tragic inequalities as a basis for the continuation of inequality. These things have been caused by segregation, and the thing to do is remove the causal factor. Fair enough. When I saw the news Tuesday that Muhyiddin Debaha, a 32-year-old Black Lives Matter activist from South Carolina, was shot to death in New Orleans, it occurred to me that the, quote, what about the black-on-black crime crowd would likely seize upon the young man's murder as an opportunity to say that he, and indeed everybody fighting the fight he fought, should have been more concerned about street crime than racist symbols and racist systems. Then he goes on to remind everybody what this guy did for a year ago when he went and snatched that Confederate flag and became a hero to fellas all over the world. Yay! I want my little child to grow up to be just like him. On Wednesday afternoon, there was little information about Debaha's death. He was shot in the thigh, died of blood loss. He was riding his bicycle. Though we don't have any information about a motive or suspects, we know that shootings such as the one that killed Debaha are numbingly common in New Orleans. We also know that most of the men who are committing the murders are black, just like Debaha was. And still, Black Lives Matter remain. This is a black columnist. And still, Black Lives Matter remains an important and necessary argument to make. The death of an activist doesn't change that, even if we find out that somebody black killed him. At the website for Black Lives Matter Global Network, you'll find the argument that black communities have been deeply traumatized by, quote, state violence and systems of oppression, unquote, and the history of oppression has, quote, undermined our capacity to live with our full humanity, connection, and purpose, unquote. That argument doesn't sound much different from King's sermon linking segregation to higher rates of crime. Okay, does anybody here understand why now we don't go into causes and solutions? Here we've got Black Lives Matter saying, yeah, because we are victims of 4 million years of white racist oppression, we really not really firing on full capacity to live with our full humanity, connection, and purpose. And that's why we go around bunking white people, Asian people, young people, old people, gay people, straight people, kitties, puppies, and turtles over the damn head. And don't forget the Amish and the Eskimos. I don't really Okay. I don't care. I don't care what's behind this enormous level of black dysfunction. But I do know holding on to it like a life raft and blaming other people for what your problem is, blaming other people that you fell for the biggest lie of this generation and it killed you, that's not my problem. That was your problem, dude. Because we're the ones sitting here telling you that you're a fool if you think you have more to fear from cops than from your brothers. Yet we get this guy, right? I mean, isn't it amazing that the New Orleans paper, pays this guy to write columns like this? I mean, that's the genius. He's the genius of the whole operation. He's the deputy editorial page editor. So every day he just, gets up, goes to work, has a lunch bucket, sits down and goes, white people did it. How can I count the ways? How much white people suck? Let me count the ways. How bad is New Orleans? How many different ways can I find to blame this on white people today? Then at the end of every 2 weeks, he goes to some white guy and said, oh yeah, can I have my money now? The guy goes, man, you're a hero. That's his life. That's his life. And then people go, hey, what's happening to those newspapers, Colin? They seem to be dying. It must be the internet. Because people only want to read 25-word articles now. That's what's happening. Doesn't have anything to do with the newspapers, Colin, does it? They hire clowns like that to write clownish articles like this. And you want to tell me that the problem of newspapers are somehow found outside of the doors of the papers? This guy could write for any major newspaper in America, all the top 25. He could go and write the same story every damn day. And it's weird how all these papers are going through these major changes. And every time they do, they always get the brainiacs in the room, right? And they're sitting there scratching their heads and they're looking out the window and they're sipping on a cup of Starbucks, rocking back and forth in their chair. They really need to find the secret. How are they going to keep this newspaper in business? Because, well, they've been behind the 8 ball for 10 years. I mean, every time something happens on the internet, they're like 2 or 3 years behind. Easy. And every time they come up with a solution, it's always the same solution. Yeah, why don't we keep doing what we've been doing, except we'll do 10 times more of that? Yeah, do we have anybody here that can write editorials about black criminality and black victimization? And pretend it's not one big fat lie? I could do that. Good. I knew you were a genius, dude. Everybody looks at each other like, yeah, it's almost like some kind of crazy beer commercial. Yeah, we're the geniuses. Then they all go back to their desks and wait for the next tsunami to wash over their paper where a bunch of reporters get fired, where they're doing this and they're doing that, and people are going, oh yeah, our paper might not survive, but let's see how we can give it a go. Isn't that weird? I mean, this guy died living a lie, and now they celebrate the lie. And they elevate the dude living the lie. Oh yeah, that's Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That's who that is. That's the moral equivalent. Yeah, he jumped right over that. Yeah, he jumped right over that yellow police tape. Yeah. Attacked that white guy with the Confederate flag. Oh yeah, that's what he did. That dude's the leader. Okay, here's my one question about the guy. And you know the one thing I don't like about doing podcasts and videos? That every once in a while I have to cast myself as the fuddy-duddy. I have to cast myself as the prissy dude who tells people at our minds.com page, hey, don't be dropping any obscenities or vulgarities or we'll kick your butt off here. I'm the guy that has to come to a story like this and go, oh yeah, did that dude have a job? Did he have a job? Did he do something with his life to justify his purpose on this earth? To justify that 1 square meter of ground he took up on this planet? Anything? Was he a doctor, a lawyer? Butcher, baker, candlestick maker? What? What did he do? I don't know. I've probably read 10 articles about the dude so far. They all say the same thing. He was a great dude. People liked him. He was magnetic. He got kicked out of a city council meeting. Did you know that? He wanted a police review board. Yeah, he wanted to put himself in charge of the police in Charlotte. That's right. Yeah. People didn't think that was a good idea. Yeah, we call those people bad people. Now he's dead, and not one person will say, wow, that was a big waste. Guess that disproved your entire life. You know, up in Vermont, the biggest high school in the state of Vermont this month is flying a Black Lives Matter flag. Vermont, of course, is the whitest state in America. 1.5% black people live there. So they went to the principal and the people doing this, and they assured everybody they knew what Black Lives Matter meant. They knew it meant, well, we value everybody's life. Now, they're either incapable of reading or they're being disingenuous, which of course is a polite way of saying they're lying their butts off. Black Lives Matter means you're not down with the cops because cops are the tip of the spear of the white racism, keeping people down because everybody knows black people are not responsible for their own actions, blah, blah, blah. Any of that sound familiar? Let's put a postscript on something we did yesterday. P.S. So we probably did that podcast too early yesterday. We did a podcast about how on Sunday night there was a couple 100,000 people on the streets of Philadelphia. And the day later, the next 24 hours, there was 5-10 articles that said, oh yeah, that was a white riot, and that is proof positive that cops are racist, and those white people are exerting their white privilege because nobody came out and clunked them over the head. Nobody tear gassed them. Nobody shot them. I mean, today there was probably 20, 30, 40, 50 stories, the same thing, it was the same theme. So this was either a case of, great minds think alike, or B, somebody turned on a switch at some, beehive of Black Lives Matter PR mavens, and they all sent it out saying, look, white people do it too. Look, white people do it too. Why is that bad man Colin Flaherty trying to blame us for all this black criminality when white people do it too? I mean, I haven't seen so many black people and their liberal enablers happy since Kwanzaa. Of course, we know it's a lie. As we talked about yesterday, we know that, there was a video of a couple of white kids turning over a car. There were black people in that picture too. Anybody notice? I did. But then the other video that's getting a lot of traction is something called a Wawa. It's kind of a 7-Eleven, very popular in this region. I mean, there was just a bunch of people that just rushed in and looted the place. They looted it and destroyed it. A couple of white kids in Eagles jerseys were there throwing stuff around. They were prancing around. They were prancing. Everybody else was like, this is the way it worked. If you look at the video, which we posted yesterday. I also posted it on Twitter. If you look at the video, you'll see the black people going in there and there's like all the stuff on the floor. They're like, fishing through to get their favorite brand of potato chips or local baked goods from Tasty Cakes. And they pick one up with one hand. The other hand, they're reaching into the pile and throwing that outside. I mean, it's a thing. And so now this is all like an example of white privilege, right? I was talking to one of our great viewers on our videos and on this channel, this podcast, the other night, Thomas in Payne. He helped out with a lot of the great graphics we did. He helped out with the web design of ColinFlaherty.com. Great guy. And he reminded me, as the violence escalates, so must the deception to keep up with it. But so my only question is, how high can it go? How high can the deception go? There's no limit to the violence. How high can the deception go in keeping up with it? How many crazy excuses can we hear for this violence? I saw today in the paper there was a big story. A woman is giving a lecture to Emory. I think it's Emory University. She's giving a lecture. And the lecture is something we've talked about here a couple of years ago. A local city councilwoman introduced a resolution saying, black people are suffering from post-traumatic slavery disorder. Wow. And now we got a college professor that they are actually paying real money to come and give the same lecture about how slavery messed up all black people, and somehow that is the fault of Colin Flaherty and everyone who looks like him. And if they don't look like him, if they're Asian, it's their fault too. And so that's the answer to at least how high can the deception go today. That's pretty high. Here's a weird story out of Cleveland. We're going to stay on the topic of deception, but this is kind of self-deception. If you've ever been to Cleveland, as I was last summer for the Republican National Convention, I was just walking around seeing what was going on. If you've ever been to Cleveland, You know, the people say, oh yeah, Cleveland's great. We got the lake, we got this, we got that. Man, have you been downtown? Have you been over here, Colin? It's really fantastic. People like it here. I mean, I was talking to people on the light rail as I was going downtown. Everybody seemed like they were down with the cause. But then I would say, I'd never been to Cleveland before, but I feel like I know these places since I've seen so many videos and read so many stories and talked to so many people about Cleveland. And I would say, well, what about East Cleveland? That's where the fellas live. It's a huge section of Cleveland. Well, that is a catastrophe. No, that's not really part of Cleveland. That's East Cleveland. You don't go to, that's a no-go zone. Whatever you like about Cleveland does not exist in that area. And now we found out why. Today, we found out that the cops are probably causing all the criminality in East Cleveland.
People who live nearby say the Waterloo Arts District is generally pretty safe, right up until the moment when they're ducking for cover in their own homes.
You know, you got to get down on the ground, hide, cover your head and stuff like that. Make sure you children are in the back of the house and stuff like that, and just stay out the way.
Sherry Foster lives around the corner from where the gas station shootout happened, and State Representative Bill Patton says Cleveland shouldn't be like this.
Well, you would think you're in the Middle East when you were watching the news. There's very little difference in what happened here and what happens on an ongoing basis in the Middle East.
Representative Patman is looking to dip into what he thinks would be a roughly $1 billion rainy day fund to pay for state aircraft, intelligence units, and even state police patrols.
Things are not where they should be, and that we have other assets we can bring to bear.
But Foster says more police in her neighborhood doesn't sound like a great idea.
Authority, period. It's just, that's the police.
She feels like making the streets more safe starts with grassroots outreach, even from police officers, to bring communities together.
Wouldn't have to get the representatives to bring in more power. Wouldn't have to get, you know, people from different cities and different counties to come in and figure out how can we stop the violence.
We reached out to the city, and the mayor's office tells us that our phone call was the first that they've heard of Representative Patman's idea.
You can't see, I'm looking at the headline in that story we just listened to. And it said, people who live in the Waterloo Arts District wonder if more cops will curb violence or just escalate tension. I mean, that's exactly what we heard. That is exactly what we heard out of St. Louis today. Except they weren't asking a question. They were telling us what was going on. Now, anybody who's listened to these podcasts or my videos or my books knows that St. Louis is really a place we don't spend a lot of time on because it's too easy. St. Louis, Detroit, South Chicago, Memphis, even New Orleans. For us to do a story about those places, it really has to rise above somehow and really has to illuminate something we're talking about. That really fit the goal. That really fit that description today. Somebody sent me a link from St. Louis. And he said, Colin, you're not going to believe this story because it's about black kids being suspended in St. Louis schools at a higher rate than white kids and how that's really, really unjust. I said, okay, I've been doing these stories by the dozens because somebody turned a switch on 6 months ago and basically dozens and dozens of school districts around the country are doing the exact same story, that more black kids get suspended than white students, than white kids. That is proof positive that white teachers are picking on black kids for no reason whatsoever. Okay? So check out this story from St. Louis and see, tell me if you had the same reaction at the beginning. It's like, hey, this must be the wrong video. This must be the wrong story because I can't see how we're going to start here and end where that guy who sent it to me said we're going to end.
Exchanging blows at school like this one come out all the time, but there's now another troubling aspect. Some parents and advocates say the discipline for school fights is different depending on what the child looks like. News 4's Lauren Traeger is investigating claims of discrimination in school discipline.
They keep fighting the same kid over and over for what? Stacey Washington says she can barely stand to watch this video, surveillance video from inside Hazelwood North Middle School. A girl in an orange jacket seen here standing in the far corner when seemingly out of nowhere she attacks Stacey's daughter.
They made the picture no clearer. The video speaks for itself.
But Stacey says it was far from the first time her daughter has been bullied at school. News 4 has chosen to conceal her daughter's identity.
I was disgusted with the school district.
In a lawsuit filed against administrators for Hazelwood School District, Stacey's lawyers outline multiple times they say Stacey's daughter was attacked in August 2016, twice in October that year, and again in March of 2017, the fight captured on video. Each time, Stacey says she tried to get the school district to do something, pointing out posts the other girls made, like this video she says was titled Adventures in Fighting.
Do you think the school district should have done more to prevent these fights?
Absolutely.
But instead of getting at the root causes and figuring out who was really responsible, the school district, according to the lawsuit, simply suspended everyone involved in the fights, including Stacey's daughter.
Here, you're suspending my child. Why? Because she's defending herself. I mean, how could you possibly get an education when you're steady getting suspended from school?
She believes the punishment was unfair and feels it's because of her daughter's race.
They didn't care because it's black kids fighting black kids. Why would they care?
Stacey's beliefs, according to legal experts like Luz Maria Enriquez, may in fact be supported by startling statistics.
I think that her experience really resembles what the data is confirming and suggesting.
School discipline has historically come with disparities. National data from the Department of Education shows black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white boys, often for the exact same offense. But new studies have recently broken the data down by gender. According to an ACLU study, black girls in Missouri are 6 times more likely to receive out-of-school suspensions compared to white girls.
It's really surprising to me that the target population seems to be girls of color.
Enriquez, a lawyer for Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, says school discipline can have lifelong consequences.
Study after study shows that children who are suspended or expelled are more likely to be suspended again. They are more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to repeat a grade. And all of that is linked to involvement in the juvenile and eventually the criminal justice system.
Data, too, shows that black girls are the fastest growing segment of the juvenile justice system. In fact, Stacey's daughter was at first charged criminally for fighting, but the charges were later dropped.
I wasn't going to allow my daughter to attend Hazelwood Central. At that point, the middle school failed my child.
The school district told us they could not speak to pending litigation, but sent a statement saying in part, quote, "Please know that we take all student behavior incidents seriously and look at each one individually to determine the appropriate actions, punitive, corrective, and restorative."
If you're not involved, they're pretty much going to punish your kid until they're kicked out.
Stacey says her daughter is bubbly and social around her peers, but was reserved around us. She's had to get counseling, her mom says, in addition to being treated for concussions. She says she wanted to speak out to see changes in how schools dole out their discipline.
Our tax dollars are paying them for what?
Recent studies suggest that a big part of the problem is that black girls are often perceived as more adult-like than their peers and are disciplined more harshly as a result. Enriquez says the Federal Department of Education recommends using suspensions as a last resort, but she says in her experience, Missouri districts still adopt a more zero-tolerance approach to school fights, suspending all of those who are involved instead. Certainly a troubling issue, one we'll keep following.
So are you still as dizzy as I was the first time I saw that story where it opens up, goes, where there's a fight in school, and we see a lot of these videos. Yeah, when you saw those videos, did you notice anything, any central organizing feature of the people involved in the violence inside schools? Did you notice one damn thing they had in common? No, Colin, I didn't know that. Didn't see anything, Colin. Well, did you notice everybody is black and violence in schools is a black thing? Did you notice that? Oh, Colin, no, I didn't really notice that because, to me, crime doesn't really have a color, Colin. Colin, do you have a problem? Okay, so that's how it started. She's talking about an enormous amount of violence, and you see videos, a bunch of black people, a bunch of black women fighting with each other. And they said it's been happening a long time. So then the story's going along, blah, 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 whistling down the road. Next thing you know, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, white people are responsible for this. What? What just happened? How did white people get responsible for that? Well, here's how. Because, see, here's what happened. Did you catch the Hispanic lawyer doing the people of color routine? When you when you catch a black person committing a crime or breaking the law, when you catch a black person breaking the law, that causes them to break the law. It's kind of a time travel thing. You have to know a lot about quantum physics to kind of get it. If I catch you committing a crime here, somehow that caused you to decide to commit the crime 1 minute, 10 minutes, 24 hours ago. Does that make sense? That's what we just heard from a St. Louis TV news station. That was their investigative reporter. No, she's not doing investigative reporting. She's doing science fiction reporting. There's a show on TV now called Counterpart. I think it's on Netflix. Yes, I watched it, 3 episodes. And part of it involves... This is not a spoiler alert. This is the show. Somehow there's a parallel universe and there's a rip between the universes and people are going back and forth one to the other. So maybe that's how she's rolling. But watch how often you hear that. Catching a black person committing a crime causes the black person to commit the crime in the first place. That's why I got kicked off of YouTube. The final blow. Atlantic Magazine, the venerable Atlantic Magazine, did a story that said white people moving into black neighborhoods causes black people to commit crime. Catching black people committing crime causes them to commit crime. So, went on my little faithful YouTube channel and I wrote an article about it and I said, oh yeah, whoever wrote that is insane. Just like everybody else who works at the Atlantic is pretty much insane. I don't know why YouTube kicked me off for that, but they did. Somehow I violated community standards. Is that violating community standards to call white liberals insane? Oh man, hope I never have to live in that community. Why don't we head down to Jacksonville, Florida? This is kind of the latest chapter in a story we've been doing for a long time. And this story is pretty much, they all come out of the same place. They all come out of Central Casting. A bunch of black people are targeting Hispanics for crime and violence. Except they don't use the active voice. As you remember your high school grammar, they use the passive voice. So instead of saying fellas are targeting Hispanics, they say Hispanics are being targeted. All of a sudden, if you do passive voice, then you can remove from the sentence the person who's responsible for what you're really talking about. Lots and lots of people in D.C. use that construction when they kind of get caught with their hand in the cookie jar and they have to say something bad's happened. They'll say, well, the Hispanics were attacked, instead of saying the fellas attacked the Hispanics. That way you can kind of, it seems to work a lot. I hear it a lot. And, it seems to work. And nobody seems to notice it. But this story takes a weird turn. So let's give this story a listen from Jacksonville. And I'm going to tell you the weird story this one took, but it wasn't actually in the video. It's in the text down below.
A neighborhood crime alert. There's been a pattern of armed robberies on the south side in recent days, and all of the victims are said to be Hispanic men.
Here's a look at a map of where they've been reported, and in each case, the crooks made off with their cash. Jennifer Scott Johnson is looking into this neighborhood crime alert since Saturday. He's joining us live on the south side. Scott, pretty scary stuff.
Very scary, Tarek. This is one of the apartment complexes. One of the robberies happened here on Powers Avenue. In the case, they pushed the guy to the ground, start wailing on him with hammers and guns, all to get wads of cash that they know these guys have on them. News4Jax has found 3 reports so far on the south side where a gun and hammer were used. Take this case at this apartment complex on Powers Avenue. An attacker hit him in the head approximately 4 times with a hammer while telling him, "Be quiet, keep it down, and give me the money." Then in another case on Barnhill Drive, struck the victim 3 times with a large metal hammer. They're walking out on this road with a lot of cash.
Yeah, that's because they don't have social security numbers. All of them are not legal.
I met up with News4Jax crime analyst Gil Smith in an area where a lot of immigrants live near Southside apartment complexes. He says these immigrants can be targets because they often get paid in cash.
The criminals are assuming that they're not legal, so then they can go ahead and rob them and know that they may not report this. I'm sure this is a very underreported crime.
They know it. And they target these individuals.
Rebecca Black is a local immigration attorney. She's not surprised by the hesitation to talk to police.
They're afraid now to, even though there's programs in place to protect them, they're really terrified to go to local law enforcement and say these bad things are happening.
I've also learned 2 more Southside cases we already reported this weekend could be linked. First, there was the shooting Friday night on Barnes Road. No hammer was used, but that robbery victim was Hispanic. Also Friday night at the Countryside Village Mobile Home Park on Beach Boulevard, a Hispanic man was shot, and the attacker asked, "Where's the dinero?" And so investigators trying to solve these variety of crimes. If it is the same person or group of people, can't say for sure, but if you know anything, call Crime Stoppers.
Okay, so in that story, they don't tell you that black people are doing it. That comes from the sheriff's website. That comes from a local radio. They said, oh, yeah, it was a black person that did it. But it's amazing. Like, you get these smart people on there, right? You get this lawyer. You get a crime consultant. You get a reporter. I'm just telling you, these aren't stupid people. But not one of them thinks it's significant that black people are targeting Hispanic people. I mean, the fact that the Hispanics are victims was significant. So why wouldn't it be significant that black people are doing it? Has anybody ever heard of anybody doing that before? I mean, besides Colin and his documenting that in his books ad nauseum. Oh yeah, they went to that immigration person. You know, I'm an immigration attorney, and yes, this is happening a lot. Yes, it is. Here's what she said I don't think she said this in the actual video, but what she said in the print version of this story is that she blames it all on Trump. Because Hispanic people are more vulnerable now because they feel like they don't want to go to the cops if people commit crimes. And everybody knows that is Trump's fault. Wow. How delusional do you have to be to make that tortured construction? I mean, this is the same kind of delusion that led our hero at the beginning of this video, the beginning of this podcast. This is the same kind of delusion that led him to think he could go from one of America's most dangerous cities, North Charlotte, down to New Orleans, another truly dangerous place. He could just go down there and he'd be fine. And now the lady says, oh yeah, I know why black people are targeting Hispanic people. Oh, that's clear as day. Trump did it. And the violence grows. And the deception is struggling to keep up with it. We're seeing it every day, more and more and more. Glad I'm able to document it here with you on this podcast. If you guys aren't following me over on Twitter and Facebook, get over and do that. I know you're probably over at minds.com too, but get over there and subscribe to that. If for no other reason than, they cut, it's like some version of what they call it, the tripartite stool, the 3-legged stool of American defense. You got air, sea, and land-based missiles, and that's our deterrent. So we got 4 legs on the stool that hopefully will make it also stable. So I hope you'll follow me on those other things. Thanks, everybody, for your generosity on Minds.com and wiring me your points. Thanks, everybody, for making generous donations to me on PayPal that make this podcast and my videos possible. Happy to be here with you, exposing the greatest lie of this generation. And I'm long past worrying about whether this makes any black kids angry.